Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today we have a question from our friend St. Magnic, and it's a question I got asked by quite a few of you recently in the comments of these videos. If you're wondering how to ask questions for the next edition of Q&A with the Coach, just leave your questions in the comments below or email me at ramseydewey@gmail.com. So, St. Magnic says, hey Ramsey, what do you think of Mike Perry, UFC fighter Mike Perry, calling out Michael Jai White, action movie star, martial artist Michael Jai White, a black belt of 7 different arts with evident fight footage versus a professional MMA fighter actively competing at the top level? So I looked into that whole debacle and meh. Ugh. But for those of you who want me to elaborate on meh, well, here I go. So I invested a little bit of time into digging up the details, listening to the interviews, trying to figure out what was going on, if this is worth anybody's time, and meh. But here's a synopsis. Michael Jai White, some time ago in an interview, was speaking about training with the late Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice, that guy who got his start doing those street fight videos on YouTube and then ended up with a contract as a professional MMA fighter for some time before he ultimately passed away. So Michael Jai White said something along the lines of he was attempting to teach Kimbo a certain technique, and Kimbo was having a difficult time grasping the concept. He actually put it a lot more mildly than that, but that's a paraphrasal. And that's understandable. If you attempt to teach anybody anything, it takes time to grasp. It's difficult to grasp new concepts. I didn't see anything offensive there, but Mike Perry did. He saw this as one of several things. It could be a non-fighter trying to alpha up on an actual fighter. He might have seen this as perhaps a man trying to speak ill of the dead. I don't think it was either of those things, but I guess that's how Mike Perry interpreted it. And so he said some unkind words on the internet. Most specifically, he called Michael Jai White by the N-word, a racial slur, which, if you're not aware, in the United States anyway, if a white man is calling a black man the N-word, especially with other derogatory words such as dirty, or I'm not sure what his exact language was, but it was clearly meant to offend. That's looked down upon, and understandably so. We shouldn't be calling people names. We shouldn't be trying to say mean-spirited things to other people, especially regarding something such as the color of our skin, which we have no control over. That just doesn't make any kind of logical sense, but Mike Perry was clearly looking for a reaction, looking for a strong reaction. When you get strong reactions, you get media attention, and he did. Now, normally, in the public sphere, if a white man calls a black man the N-word, throws out a very negatively charged racial slur, that can end a career. People are being fired over less than that. People are being completely doxxed for less than that. But professionally, nothing happened to Mike Perry. Now, some people on the internet spoke about it. Some people offered some backlash and said, hey, Mike Perry, that's not a nice thing to do. You shouldn't be using that word. Not cool, man, not cool. And this is where it gets interesting. Mike Perry went to Twitter, I think it was, and wrote, hey, I took a DNA test, and it turns out I'm like 2% African, so I can use that word. And that's such a fascinating thing to unpack right there. I'm 2% African, and therefore I can say terrible things to other people. It's strange logic, man. It is strange logic. But let's unpack that a little bit more. So my father-in-law, my wife's father, took a DNA test some time ago and found out that, I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's well above 2%, that he is part African, which he had no idea because he is a white man and his parents are very white people and their parents are very white people. And everyone that he has pictures of his ancestors are white people. So he was kind of surprised, like, holy crap, I'm part black. That's so interesting. I wonder how that happened. And so my wife apparently has inherited some of that genetic makeup. So even though she is a very white person, she's part African. And my kids, even my youngest daughter, who is the blondest, whitest, most alabaster, glowing white child you will ever see, is technically blacker than Mike Perry, who feels that because of his DNA test, he's allowed to say mean, rude, horrible things to other people because of the color of their skin. So, not cool. What do I think about that? I think it's silly. I think it's a ridiculous rationalization for using racist epithets. Now, it was interesting to hear Michael Jai White's response to this after he was called the N-word by Mike Perry. Instead of getting angry, he said something along the lines of, I feel like Mike Perry is not in a good place emotionally right now. I feel like he's not thinking this through, with the way that he should be. Like he's clearly going through some issues right now. Now, I don't want to put words in Michael Jai White's mouth, but that's kind of the synopsis of it. But he went on to say, when egged by the interviewer, well, what if you met him? What if you saw him in person? What would you say? To which Michael Jai White said, things would be interesting if we met in person. I will leave it at that. So I don't know if that means that they would exchange words over the issue, or if they would put on the gloves and scrap over the issue, or whatever the case would be. But it would be interesting. It's always interesting when you meet somebody in person with whom you had previously only had an online relationship. Man, remember when internet dating was brand new? I do, man. I remember I was like, how old was I? 21, 22 years old? I think I was about 21. And internet dating websites were like brand new. And I remember I thought, I'd just been dumped by this girl I thought I was in love with. I was heartbroken. And I kind of turned to the internet. And I was like, what's this all about? And I met this girl online. And I remember back then it was super, super taboo to meet people on the internet. Man, that was like, you're the scum of the earth if you meet somebody on the internet. You're some kind of you're a loser. You are the loser of the losers if you meet somebody on the internet. Now that probably sounds really weird to people growing up in this generation because that's normal to meet other people on the internet. But back then, that was the worst. But I met this girl on the internet, and we exchanged some emails, and I felt like, wow, this girl she's awesome. And when you don't meet somebody, it's really easy to build them up like, they're the greatest thing ever. And I'm not saying there was anything wrong with this young woman, but when I met her in person, it felt like she was a very different person than I had made her out to be in my mind. It was like, in my mind, I don't know, I put her up on this big pedestal, and in reality, she turned out to be a normal human being. and it's very easy to become disillusioned with reality. So that is one way that meeting someone in person can become interesting when our expectations and the reality are very different. And so, what would happen if Michael Jai White and Mike Perry met in person? Would they just go at it like a kung fu movie? Probably not. I imagine Michael Jai White and Mike Perry would have plenty of time to calm down. They'd probably take a look at each other and be like, so yeah, man, let's, that thing you said, Michael Perry might be embarrassed by the whole situation. I mean, man, I made a video that went viral about Master Wong a while back, and I did not expect it to go viral at all. I thought maybe a few people will watch it. Maybe 100 people, maybe 1,000 tops will watch this video. And it was a video about Master Wong doing the rear naked choke incorrectly. And it turned out to be a basic technique video about how to perform a rear naked choke, a basic Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, sambo, submission grappling technique. But because of the title, because of the thumbnail, because it was pointing fingers very directly at a specific individual who's very popular on the internet, people came at it like flies, and they turned it into this giant controversy. Ramsey Dewey needs to fight Master Wong to the death now, on the streets or in a cage, to settle this beef. And I imagine a lot of people out there have fantasized about this meeting, this potential meeting between myself and Master Wong, and what would happen. And I imagine if we actually did meet in person, we'd probably just talk. And that would probably be it. We might, I don't know if we would mention the video, I don't know how the conversation would go, but we'd probably just talk. I've had a number of run-ins with people where the only relationship I had with them was online. Now, I'm not talking about internet girlfriends. Take, for example, when was it? About 15, 16, 17 years ago, there was this internet forum about fighting. And people would talk smack about each other all the time. And I would frequent this forum to see what was up, because a lot of the local fighters in the local fight scene were on this, and I wanted to stay in the loop. And people would get into arguments, they'd get into fights, not physical real fights, but internet fights. And so I'd keep tabs on this, and sometimes I would find myself getting dragged into these internet fights myself, and somehow, without even trying, seemed to have made several bitter enemies. And I remember there was this one fellow, and he was an entrepreneur, and he was working on a barbecue restaurant. He wanted to open up his own barbecue restaurant, which, cool, man, cool. And I posted something about it, not intending to be offensive at all, just asking him how his restaurant would compare to these other barbecue restaurants in the area. But because text and the nuances of text can be so difficult to correctly interpret online, whereas I'm sure if I said this in person, it would have been taken as a very straightforward question, but for some reason it was taken in the worst possible way. And suddenly this turned into a bitter rivalry, like, how dare you insult me, you insect. And man, it escalated very quickly. We never met in person. Years later, fairly recently, the guy sent me some emails and said, "Hey man, that was that was nuts how that escalated so quickly. I apologize. I'm I was in a bad spot at that point in my life, and yeah, I hope we can be cool from this point forward. I was like, yeah, water under the bridge, man. No, don't worry about it. But it is so interesting how, without being able to physically interface with another person, look them in the eyes, hear the sound of their actual voice, it is so easy to dehumanize somebody. To look at somebody on the internet and think, what do you know? You're just a stupid bald guy talking into a microphone. Boo! Hiss! In much the same way that Mike Perry said to Michael Jai White something along the lines of, you're just a foolish black person, but in much, much more offensive language. In regard to a statement with no offensive intent whatsoever, simply telling a personal narrative about training with an old friend. Weird how we do this. It speaks so highly of how necessary our physical body is. A lot of us try to exist in this virtual world, and we fall into this trap of trying to exist in this virtual world where we can sit in a seat, turn our body off, let our body go to sleep while our brain is still technically on, and engage in activities and relationships and interactions with other people without the benefit of our physical body. And that's all kinds of wrong. We need to experience the body, because our mind is our body is our mind. It's all part of our human soul. And if you try to artificially separate that into different things, we're going to create some mental illnesses, which we're seeing on the internet constantly. Read the YouTube comment section just a little bit. Don't get lost in there. But go to a video which has a significant number of dislikes on it and a significant number of comments. Read some of those. You're going to see the most venomous things. And then go to a website that is not moderated nearly as closely or carefully manicured as the YouTube comments section, because that goes through a lot of scrutiny. A lot of comments are automatically sent to spam filters and just instantly deleted by the YouTube algorithms for just being suspected of being mean-spirited. And in spite of that, so many of these leak through and offend people, because we're living without our bodies. We're trying to communicate with others without looking them in the eye first. So that's what happened with Mike Perry and Michael Jai White. You were probably wondering what would happen if they actually fought. I don't know, man. Michael Jai White, Mike Perry, they're both tough guys, right? Michael Jai White is much older. He's like twice the age of Mike Perry. He's a lot bigger, though. Like a lot bigger. He's got, like a 70, 80 pounds on him, I think. He's a big, strong man. He's a capable athlete. He does know how to fight. To what extent, I don't know. But I'm not a big fan of watching a grudge match like that go down, because I don't think it ends well for anybody. Because let's say Michael Jai White wins. Let's say they get into an exhibition fight, an MMA fight. They both step in the cage. Michael Jai White, the bigger man, the much older man, wins. The man without a professional MMA fight record wins. All of a sudden, Mike Perry loses all kinds of credibility. Hey, I thought you were a UFC fighter. Hey, an old man beat you up. This guy's an actor. He's not even a real fighter, and he beat you up. Look how bad that looks for Mike Perry. And what if Mike Perry beats up Michael Jai White in that fight? It's still a lose-lose for both men because, Mr. White gets beaten up, he loses. And what happens to Mike Perry? Oh, you beat up an old man. You beat up a guy who's not even a real fighter. What's up with that? Not cool, man. First you insult him, then you beat him up. You add insult to injury. Not cool, man. Nobody wins in this situation. So I'm not a big fan of breaking that one down, if you will. So go live in your bodies, look people in the eyes, get out there, and train, experience the real world.